if you grew up watching cartoons, you probably had a favorite cartoon. And in fact, you might still have a favorite cartoon. But one of my favorite cartoons was the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. And the Wile E. Coyote would always come up with these schemes, and he would this elaborate plan. And every time, he's going to overplay his hand, and that plan is going to backfire on him. I heard somebody make the comment this past week that Satan in every generation is going to overplay his hand. We see this pan out from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And back in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 3, as we know, that's when sin enters the world. And Satan has this plan to take God's perfect creation, Adam and Eve, and to introduce death and sin and then separation from God. And he overplays his hand, because what happens is God then introduces, in response to Satan overplaying his hand, God introduces the Redeemer. And he promises in Genesis 3:15 that he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. So the very fall that Satan caused set the stage for his ultimate destruction through Jesus Christ. And you can trace this pattern that Satan has time and time again, where he's like, oh, I have a great plan. Just like the Wile E. Coyote, I have a great plan. I'm going to destroy God. And every single time he overplays his hand, and his plan backfires. You see it with the life of Joseph, and he's like, I'm going to destroy Joseph. I'm going to sell him into slavery. And his plan backfires, and God saves a nation through Joseph, through the wrong. And we get this awesome verse of Genesis 50, verse 20, and that says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And we trace it from Pharaoh and the Israelites. We look at the book of Job, and we see that Satan overplayed his hand with Job. He sees this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, Job just loves you because all you do is protect him. And God's like, okay, sure, like, go ahead. I will allow this, and you can do whatever you want, just don't take his life. And he overplays his hand, because what happens is Job clings to God, he is vindicated, and he's doubly blessed. We see it in the life of Esther and how God uses her to save the nation of Israel. And we get to then the New Testament, and we see how Satan's strategy then is to take the very Son of God and destroy him. And on the cross, Satan thinks that he has his greatest victory. He overplays his hand, and his hand backfires, or his plan backfires. And I love what it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 8. It says, if the rulers had understood it, that context is talking about spiritual wisdom, what God's doing, his plan. It says they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Listen, every story that you read, every interaction that Satan has with God, every interaction that Satan has, he's going to overplay his hand, and it's going to backfire. And maybe you're listening and you're like, okay, great. So that's like the plan of history. We know big picture, right? Book of Revelation, Satan plays all the cards. He puts all the cards out, and he's going to lose. But what does that have to do with me personally? Be encouraged by the life of Paul. Satan's strategy plan with Paul was, well, okay, we have this guy who loves the Lord. He's spreading the gospel. I'm going to give him a thorn in the flesh, and that will solve it. And he overplays his hand. And Paul cries out to God and 3 times, and he says, God, take this away from me. And ultimately what happens with Paul on a personal level, he says, you know what? I realize that in my weakness, God's strength is the greatest. And I will glory in that thorn in the flesh. I will glory in my weakness so that my God can get all the glory. And so here is our applicational truth that we need to store in our minds, that when it looks like the enemy is winning, remember, he is going to, if he hasn't already, he is going to overplay his hand. And in your suffering, God is already working a better plan. And God will never overplay his hand, because God's knowledge will never end, God's ability will never end, and God's power has no limit, and he will always win for you.